Welcome back, everyone. Let's dive into a topic that's fun and exciting, and likely for those who attended the Cyber Summit this past week may resonate with you. For those who were there, it was nice to meet you in person, and I'm glad I got to meet some former students of mine as well as to network with my peers and be part of a panel during that discussion. But enough about that. Let's dive in. Today, we're going to move from basic networking into network security. The threats that target networks, the tools that defend them, and the security architecture organizations use to stay resilient. Networks are built for connectivity, but that connectivity also creates an attack plane or paths. The goal of security design is not to make networks perfect, it's to make them harder to compromise, easier for you and I to monitor, and to help us with faster times to recover, as we talked about in our previous around disaster recovery and business continuity. So let's talk now about network vulnerabilities. The first thing we should talk about is the TCP/IP. This was designed for communication, not for security. So its default trust module assumes that systems can talk to one another unless told otherwise. Common weaknesses include missing authentication and encryption for the basic protocols. Open ports are left unprotected. Misconfigurations. We have weak passwords and the continued use of legacy protocols or file transfer protocol known as FTP, and even Telnet. Please do not use Telnet. This is why so many modern incidents begin with something so simple: an exposed service, a weak password, or a forgotten remote access path. Recent breaches and outage reports repeatedly show attackers do not need exotic techniques when organizations leave old services exposed to the internet or fail to align or even segment their internal systems properly. So what are some common network attacks? The main network attacks you're going to need to know are denial of service and distributed denial of service, known as DOS or DDoS attacks. Also fragmentation attacks, oversized packet attacks, spoofing, and then the man in the middle or machine in the middle attacks. A denial of service attack floods a system to make it unavailable, while a distributed denial of service attack will use many systems or a bot at once. Spoofing means we're pretending to be a trusted source, such as IP spoofing, MAC spoofing, DNS spoofing, or even email spoofing. Phishing and social engineering remain especially effective because they target you and I rather than the devices. Spear phishing attacks, welling attacks, smishing attacks, vishing, all exploit trust. Spear phishing is going after your executives. Welling could also be trying to land, or spear phishing is a targeted attack against you and I or a specific business, where welling is looking for that big fish. So could be the HR department, could be an executive. Smishing is the SMS, so that's what we get on our phones. And then vishing, again, is voice, trying to use the phone to trick you and I. Why is it with a V instead of a PH? That's because of the phreaking attacks where they used to use dial-up to attack the modems to try to see if they can get into systems. Go look up what Kevin Mitnick and others have done around this topic if you're interested. Next is malware. This includes viruses, worms, trojans, ransomware, spyware, adware, and any advanced threats that we sometimes call APTs, as well as the insider threats and anything else to your environment that could cause harm. Recent incidents have shown that a single phishing email can lead to credential theft, then a malware deployment, then lateral movement across your network. This illustrates the full chain from social engineering to a technical compromise. So we need defense tools and layered protection. Defending networks takes more than one tool. It requires a defense in depth. Core tools for this include your firewalls, your IDS, your IPS, your SIEM, your anti-malware, and even your vulnerability scanners. An IDS is the intrusion detection system. Its job is to detect suspicious activity and then raise alerts. An IPS, the intrusion protection system, will actively block or at least quarantine an attack in real time. And your SIEM is your system incident or your security incident and event management, which is there to collect and correlate all the logs to help you and I as analysts see patterns across our systems. Your firewalls will filter traffic using rules and access control lists, where next generation firewalls add deep packet inspections. They build in the IDS IPS controls, as well as user identity controls to help with the defense in depth. With recent ransomware and intrusion cases, the value of this layered approach, organizations who've had strong depth in defense, such as firewalls, endpoint protection, and a SIEM, were usually able to detect and contain an attack sooner than those relying on just a single control, such as a firewall or even the endpoint agent. So now this drives home that we need compliance and monitoring. We can't just set up these controls and forget about them and never look at them. Network security requires and will support compliance actions, especially in environments that handle PCI DSS. That's your payment card transactions if you accept a credit card. Or if you're taking healthcare data for HIPAA, or if you've got SOX data, financial data, if you're a bank, or even with the common one of GDPR, which is your EU, your Data Protection Act, that we need to make sure that we understand how we protect citizens' data when they're outside the US, and how we protect our credit cards and financial information. So, for example, PCI DSS requires organizations to use firewalls, secure passwords, protect that stored credit card, encrypting the data both in transit and at rest, and maintaining anti-malware defenses. Plus, you have to regularly test your system. Do you have backups? Is it still got the same configuration? Has there been configuration drift? Leading to stricter compliance guidelines. Your SIEM will log your point of sale systems, your databases, your endpoints to help improve compliance and drive and detect violations at the same time. So think about some recent regulatory breach discussions we've seen in our Slack feeds, Discord feeds, even on the internet. One reoccurring lesson is that monitoring and logging are only useful if someone reviews something. Say that again. It's only useful if we actually take the time to review and take action on these events. So what do we do now? We need to secure our network. We need to build secure network infrastructure and design. So let's move from attacks to the way we secure our networks and how they're built. Network architecture is the blueprint for how systems, devices, and services will communicate, as well as a secure architecture will balance your performance, your usability, as well as security. Key components will include the routers, your switches, your firewalls, a load balancer, your security tools such, again, as your IDS or IPS, your proxies, or even your VPN networks and their gateways. We must do segmentation. We must divide the network into smaller pieces so attackers can't move freely if one part is compromised. Some techniques to do this is to build virtual local area networks, known as VLANs. Break your network into subnets. Put access control lists, known as ACLs, in place. These are especially useful for isolating your line of businesses from each other. Have an HR VLAN, a finance VLAN, a guest network, and other sensitive zones, and make it almost impossible to move around so that HR can't see financial data, finance people can't see HR data, vice versa. Next are your demilitarized zones for those who have assets that must be reached by their customers or need to be publicly facing. This is your mail. This could be a portal. You want to create a buffer between your internal systems and the internet. By hosting your publicly facing services, again, your mail, your web actions, your DNS, while keeping your internal systems hidden. Your VPNs are great for those who are remote or outside of your corporate office because it encrypts the traffic for secure remote access or even from site to site communication. While proxies act as a middleman that can filter, log, and cache your web traffic. Additionally, we must use network access controls, which means that when I plug in this laptop into the jack at my desk, it checks whether the device meets the policies before it allows it access. It looks for things like up-to-date patches, antivirus, a PKI, which is the public key infrastructure cert I've deployed via my mobile device management solution or another deployment tool, as well as any deployed or approved device type. It shouldn't see iPads on my network if I don't allow them. Shouldn't see IoT, such as Nest thermostats, or anything else if they're not an approved device. With the growth of hybrid and remote work as well as cloud migrations, organizations have to rethink what our perimeter actually looks like, which is why NAC, the network access control, your VPNs, and other segmentations have become even more important because we need those to go into our next topic, zero trust, as well as building resiliency and redundancy in our environment. A secure design also plans for failure, which means redundancy means we have backups. We've tested them. We have 3 copies of data in 2 different locations, one of them being offline, ready to take over if one of those fails. Or having RAID systems where we strike the data to make sure that if we lose a disk, we do not lose all of our data, leading to high availability so our systems stay up through the combination of the redundancy and monitoring we have in place. We've tested our failover, or we've made it automatic to switch to our backup systems when a disaster happens, because we need to practice for disaster recovery, which is the process of restoring services after any major failure, a hurricane, a flood, a ransomware attack, or any other disruption to our systems. And then I mentioned zero trust. This is a major design principle to never trust, always verify. So that means every user, device, and connection must be authenticated and authorized continuously with least privilege access, micro-segmentation, identity verification, and ongoing monitoring. Recent cloud and remote access incidents show why zero trust matters. Organizations can no longer assume that anything inside the network is automatically safe. So let's talk about cloud and the shared responsibility. Secure design also applies to our cloud environments. Under the shared responsibility model, the provider secures the infrastructure, your servers, while you and I are responsible for the identity, the data, and any of the configurations inside of them if you're running infrastructure as code. Tools like VPCs, so virtual private connections, subnets, and security groups help isolate our cloud resources, and zero trust principles can and should be applied to our cloud workloads. Cloud misconfiguration stories are a good reminder that the cloud is not automatically secure just because the provider says it is secure, or that they even are secure themselves. You and I, as the customer, still have to configure the access through identity and access management, need to deploy our own logging via agents or internal tools, and we have to segment the environment correctly with resource groups, network security groups, and using access control lists. So let's go a little bit deeper. This is a quick lecture, but you may want to know more about this. So how can you go deeper? Start by mapping these ideas to the technology you already use every day. Try looking at your home network or the lab environment and identify other router, firewall, or any segmentations you already have in place. Read a recent breach report or outage summary and ask, was this a spoofing attack, a phishing entry point, a segmentation failure, or just a missing failover control? Watch how packets move through your network using tools like Wireshark or tracing your DNS, your TCP, or your HTTP connections on your own machine. Look up public case studies on ransomware or distributed denial of service and compare it against the tools and concepts that I've talked about in this video. What would have stopped it? What would have detected it? What, or if anything, would have slowed it down? This material is directly useful for a lot of careers today. If you want to work in the SOC, the topics we've talked about around logs, alerts, IDS, IPS, and SIEM dashboards will be part of your job. If you work in network administration or cloud security, you'll need to know segmentation, understand VLANs, DMZs, VPNs, NAC, and how to build and maintain the security and secure architecture designs, both at the network layer and application layer. If you're interested in incident response, understanding network protocols and traffic flows make it much easier to contain threats and explain what happened to your peers, to your leadership, and potentially even to your board. If you're leaning towards GRC, or for those who are already in leadership, these concepts help you better explain your policies, help articulate your risk by storytelling, and help you justify investments in resiliency and monitoring capabilities, process, and procedures. Personally, you can apply the same ideas by using stronger passwords or passphrases, enabling MFA on all systems. Avoid legacy services, keeping your devices patched. Apply those Microsoft, Adobe patches, Apple patches, and pay attention to any suspicious email, links, or phone calls you get. Even at home, zero trust thinking helps. Don't assume a device, a Wi-Fi network, or an email message is safe just because it looks familiar. So here's our big takeaway. Network security is not one product or one control. It's a layered system built to assume attacks, slow them down, detect them, and then recover from them. As you study, remember the sequence. Understand the network, recognize the threats, choose the right protections, design for resilience. Those are the skills that make you useful both in a class, in your career, or in your digital lives. So as always, I hope everyone enjoys the topics we're learning. Feel free to reach out with any questions. But until next time, stay safe and stay secure, everyone.